All right, buckle up, everybody. Welcome to a deep dive into Indiana Jones and the Great Circle.
Ooh, I like the sound of that.
So we've got our intel laid out here, ready to go.
Oh, yeah, lay it on me. What do we have?
We've got the official website from Bethesda,
Of course.
the
We're
game's Wikipedia page.
the source of all truth.
We even have some of those wonderfully opinionated reviews from Metacritic.
Always a good time.
And to top it all off, a spicy article from The Gamer called "The Less You Play Indiana Jones, the Better It Gets."
Oh, that's a hot take. What are they getting at with that?
Well, that's exactly what we're going to find out, isn't it?
I'm hooked already.
Is this game a worthy addition to the legendary franchise, or is it lost in a jungle of mediocrity? Let's find out.
I am so ready.
What immediately jumps out about this game is the Great Circle. Have you heard about this?
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that makes you go,
So tell me more about that.
Well, imagine you've got all these locations around the world, right?
Okay, yeah.
And they're all perfectly aligned, forming this huge circle. And it's humming with power, like a power that could be incredibly beneficial or unbelievably dangerous.
Oh, okay.
You know, it's the kind of hook that Indy himself would jump at, wouldn't you agree?
Okay, so you definitely got me intrigued. I'm always up for a good globe-trotting puzzle, but before we get too far into it, is this set in like the classic indie era, or have they gone totally rogue with the timeline?
No. They've actually placed it in a really sweet spot,
Okay.
right between Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Last Crusade.
Really?
1937 to be exact. So you've got those classic indie vibes.
Oh,
You know, you've got the Nazis, you got the black shirts causing their usual mayhem, but it's a fresh story to uncover.
okay, so now that we have that set, how does the game actually put you in Indy's boots? Like, how does it all play out?
Okay, so get this. They went with a first-person perspective.
Really? First person?
Yeah, it's supposed to really immerse you in the experience, like really make you feel like you are Indy sneaking through tombs and making those split-second decisions. Now, they do switch to third person for certain actions, you know, like climbing or using the whip, but a lot of the game, it keeps you right there in Indy's head.
Wow, so first person for an Indiana Jones game. That's a really bold move. I'm curious, does it actually work?
Well, I think that's the debate, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, so much of the charm is that iconic silhouette, you know, the whip cracking, the daring stunts. So does it still feel like Indian first person?
Right.
I think that's where the whip comes in. They've really made it more than just a weapon.
Okay, I see.
It's your main tool for traversal, for combat, even for puzzle solving. It's like you're constantly using your wits and that trusty whip to get out of those tight spots like a true adventurer, not just, you know, relying on brute force.
Okay, that's really interesting. It's not just about seeing Indy do these really cool things, but it's about you feeling like you are the one pulling off those really clever moves.
Exactly.
But I gotta ask, where are we doing all this whip swinging and puzzle solving?
Right.
Is it just like one big location, or are we going full-on globe-trotting like in the movies?
Oh, no, you are definitely globetrotting in this game.
Okay, good.
We're talking Vatican City,
Oh, wow.
Egyptian pyramids,
Okay,
even the Himalayas,
no way.
and then there's Shanghai and the ancient city of Sukhothai thrown in for good measure. It's a whirlwind tour of all these iconic and exotic locations. Each one has its own visual style and challenges.
You sold me.
Yeah.
But when it comes to, facing down those Nazi goons, is it all just guns blazing, or is there room for a little bit of stealth? I mean, I imagine Indy's good at both, right?
He is. And you know what? The game lets you choose.
Oh, okay.
You can go full Rambo if you want.
Okay.
Guns and whip flying, or you can embrace your inner shadow and sneak right past the enemies. It's all about reading the situation and adapting your approach. It adds a layer of strategy to the action, which keeps things really fresh.
Choice is always a good thing, especially in a game that, could easily fall into that shoot first, ask questions later pattern.
Yeah, right.
So how are the puzzles? Are they just, throwaway distractions, or do they actually feel like part of that indie experience?
Most are optional, so you don't have to do them,
Okay.
but they're definitely designed for those who like a good mental challenge.
Okay, yeah.
And they're woven into the environments, often tied to, like the lore or the history of the location.
Wow.
So if you're the type to poke around and explore, you'll be rewarded with some pretty satisfying aha moments. They don't just feel tacked on, they actually feel like part of the adventure.
I like that. Okay, this is all sounding pretty good.
Yeah.
But that The Gamer article we talked about, the one that's called "The Less You Play Indiana Jones, the Better It Gets,"
Yeah.
it kind of threw me for a loop. They claim it's like playing two different games.
Oh, yeah.
Classic indie action versus this, like, open world structure. They even suggest the open world stuff actually hurts the experience. What do you think about that?
You know, that's where it gets really interesting, and I think where your personal preference really comes into play. Some players, they might find the open world totally liberating. You know, it lets them explore at their own pace, uncover secrets, really immerse themselves in the world.
Right.
Then there are others who really crave that tighter, more cinematic experience of the films, you know, where every action pushes the narrative forward. It's almost like the game is trying to find a balance between those two approaches, which, you know, that can lead to some unevenness for sure.
I could definitely see that. It's like they're trying to modernize the indie formula without losing that classic feel. But then there's the question of how well it actually works. So did the critics embrace this blend of old and new, or did they think it missed the mark?
Well, let's see. It's sitting at an 87 on Metacritic right now.
Okay.
Which, you know, is respectable, but not, like, stellar.
Yeah.
And when you read the reviews, you can see that reflected. Some critics praised the action, the story, the visuals, but then they felt like the open world was less compelling. Some even felt like it really detracted from those more focused, story-driven segments. It's almost like there's this split between those who love the freedom of open world exploration and those who prefer that more curated cinematic experience.
Yeah, it's like the eternal open world debate, isn't it? So
Okay.
it's not a universal rave,
Yeah,
but it's not a flop either.
right.
It makes you wonder if those open world elements are what's holding it back from reaching true classic status. But you know what really caught my eye?
What?
A comment on The Gamer, where someone said that this game felt like a reskinned Chronicles of Riddick, Escape from Butcher Bay.
Oh, wow. That's a pretty specific comparison.
I know. I was like, what?
Yeah.
What are they getting at with that?
Yeah, that's where we really get into the nitty-gritty of game design and influences. You know, it's true that both games share some similarities, especially like the blend of first-person action and stealth. And considering that Machine Games, the developers of this indie game, also worked on Escape from Butcher Bay, it's not entirely surprising to see some shared DNA, right?
Yeah.
But the question is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Right. Is it an homage or is it just lazy borrowing? I guess we'll have to dig deeper to see if those Riddick vibes work in Indy's favor or against him. We'll have to save that for part 2. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, what are like the key takeaways from this initial look at Indiana Jones and the Great Circle? What should our listeners be thinking about as we move forward?
Okay, well, I think we've got this tension here between that classic indie action and the more modern open world structure. It's like the game itself is on this adventure trying to figure out its own identity. Which, you know, is pretty fitting when you think about Indy's own journey in the films, right? He's always pushing those boundaries, questioning his own methods, facing all those new challenges. So I think the big question for our listener and for us as we continue this deep dive is, does sticking to the main narrative path enhance that classic indie feel? Or does embracing the open world bring something new and exciting to the franchise? It's all about finding that balance, that sweet spot where innovation meets nostalgia.
Love it. All right, listeners, take a moment to ponder that. Do you crave that tightly paced cinematic adventure, or are you ready to just lose yourself in a sprawling world of possibilities? Because when we come back for part 2, we're going full throttle into the story, the characters, the plot twists, the whole enchilada. Okay, so we're back on the saddle for part 2 of our deep dive into Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. We've laid the groundwork, we talked about gameplay, we talked about all the mechanics, but now it's time to get to the good stuff.
The story.
The story, exactly. So what is the big mystery that Indy is trying to unravel this time?
Well, remember that artifact we mentioned, you know, the one that's tied to the Great Circle?
Right.
That's the thing that kicks off this whole adventure.
Okay.
It gets snatched right out of Marshall College, sending Indy on this wild chase to recover it and, you know, uncover all its secrets. Each location on that mysterious circle, it holds like a piece of the puzzle.
I see.
And the deeper Indy digs, well, the more he realizes that the stakes are way higher than he ever imagined.
Okay, so that's classic Indy.
Yeah.
Always getting pulled into something way bigger than he bargained for.
Yeah.
But what's the driving force behind this Great Circle? Like, what is it? Is it some kind of ancient power? Or a lost civilization?
Yeah.
Alien technology?
Okay, so this is where it gets really fascinating.
Oh, okay.
It's tied to those biblical flood myths.
What?
specifically Noah's Ark.
Whoa.
The game actually suggests that the Great Circle gave Noah the power to teleport animals, to repopulate Earth after the flood.
Mm.
And now all these different factions, they're all trying to get control of that power, thinking that they can, reshape the world with it.
Whoa. Noah's Ark. Talk about a deep cut. Okay, so who are the major players in all this, in this global power struggle? I'm assuming Nazis are involved, right?
Oh, yeah, of course. Nazis are front and center, like always, right?
Right.
They're obsessed with harnessing the Great Circle for their own schemes. World domination, the usual.
Right.
But, it's not just them this time.
Oh, okay.
You've got the black shirts, Mussolini's goons, adding their own brand of chaos into the mix.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's this really mysterious organization called the Nephilim.
The Nephilim.
They're like ancient guardians of the Great Circle's power.
Oh, wow.
They're caught right in the middle, trying to keep that power from falling into the wrong hands.
Okay, so we've got Nazis, black shirts, and a secret society guarding this, ancient power. It sounds like a Tuesday for Indy. But are there any memorable characters we meet along the way? Any allies? Femme fatales, maybe, to kind of spice things up?
Oh, yeah. There are some great additions to the Indy universe here.
Okay, good.
You meet Gina Lombardi.
Gina Lombardi.
She's this investigative reporter who's searching for her missing sister.
Oh.
And, naturally she gets caught up in the whole Great Circle mystery.
Of course.
She's sharp, she's resourceful, more than capable of holding her own alongside Indy. Definitely not your typical damsel in distress.
Now, that's the kind of partner Indy needs. Someone who can keep up with his antics and add a little brains to the brawn.
Yeah.
But tell me about the big bad, the mastermind behind all this chaos. Is it some kind of mustache-twirling Nazi general, or do we get something a little more nuanced?
Okay, so the main antagonist is this guy, Emmerich Voss.
Emmerich Voss.
He's a Nazi archaeologist and a cultist obsessed with unlocking all the secrets of the Great Circle.
Yeah.
He's a true believer, convinced he can use this power to, reshape the world.
I see.
In the Nazi image.
Oh, right.
So think brains, ruthlessness, and a healthy dose of fanaticism.
Some classic indie villain material right there. But you mentioned the Nephilim earlier. They sound intriguing. Do we actually meet any of them in the story?
They do.
Oh, cool. And the most interesting one is this towering figure named Locus.
Locus.
He's physically imposing, definitely has a connection to the Great Circle, but his motives are very complex.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes he seems antagonistic, like he's trying to warn Indy away from the Great Circle's power, almost like he's some kind of protector.
I see.
But then he'll team up with Indy when it suits him, helping him fight off Nazis or the black shirts. He's a walking contradiction, really caught between his duty to safeguard the power and this growing belief that, maybe Indy is the key to preventing some kind of catastrophe.
Okay, color me even more intrigued. We've got a morally ambiguous giant, ties to an ancient order. That's some good storytelling right there.
Yeah.
But with all this talk of power and mystery, where does the adventure actually take us? Do we get to see some of those iconic Indy locations that we talked about earlier?
Oh, get ready for a whirlwind tour.
Okay.
We start in Vatican City, no big deal.
Yeah, just a casual Tuesday. But then it's off to Egypt, where Indy discovers all these ancient connections between the Nephilim and the pharaohs.
Ooh.
Think hidden tombs, hieroglyphic puzzles, all that classic Indy goodness.
Pyramids, secret societies, ancient curses. This is why I love Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
But does the story stay grounded in that familiar territory? Or does it kind of take us somewhere completely unexpected?
Well, hold on to your fedora, because it takes a turn for the bizarre.
What?
You end up on this Nazi battleship, and it's inexplicably stranded in the Himalayas.
A Nazi battleship in the Himalayas.
Yeah. It turns out they were experimenting with the Great Circle, trying to teleport themselves, across the globe. But something went wrong, leaving them frozen in time and space.
Whoa.
It's a wild twist. It really showcases that unpredictable nature of the Great Circle's power.
Yeah. A Nazi battleship in the Himalayas. That's like next level crazy. In Port Gina, she finds her missing sister on the ship, frozen.
Yeah.
That's got to be a rough reunion.
It is.
It definitely adds a whole new layer to her motivations, and it really ups the stakes for Indy. He's not just dealing with ancient power now, he's dealing with the very fabric of reality.
Exactly. And the globetrotting, it doesn't stop there.
Okay.
Through, another portal mishap, we get whisked off to Shanghai, right in the middle of the Japanese invasion.
Wow.
The action never lets up, and the settings, they are as diverse and breathtaking as you would expect from an Indiana Jones adventure.
This is sounding like the ultimate indie experience. We've got ancient mysteries, we've got Nazis, exotic locales, a little dash of sci-fi. But what's the end game? What are they ultimately fighting for?
Voss, the Nazi villain, he's convinced the Great Circle holds the key to world domination. He believes he can control, like, weather patterns, trigger earthquakes, even reshape continents. He sees himself as a new Noah,
I see.
ushering in this new world order under the Nazi banner.
So Voss basically wants to play God. Talk about hubris. But Indy, being the ever-resourceful archaeologist, I'm sure he has something to say about messing with forces beyond, like, human comprehension, right?
He does.
Okay.
He tries to warn Voss about, the dangers of meddling with the Great Circle, but Voss, he's too blinded by his ambition to listen.
Yeah.
He manages to activate the Great Circle's power, and the results, well, they're catastrophic.
No.
He accidentally triggers this massive flood that threatens to, like, engulf the entire world.
Oh, no. Not another flood. So, is this the end? Does the world drown in Voss's arrogance? Does Indy manage to save the day?
This is where Locust steps back into the picture. Remember his conflicting loyalties.
Right.
He seizes control of Noah's Ark, using its connection to the Great Circle to, like, teleport it
What?
and the flood to some unknown location. So the world is saved.
Okay.
But the mystery remains. Where did Locust go? And what does that mean for the future of the Great Circle's power?
Wow, so the world is safe, but at what cost? Locusts, Noah's Ark, this world-altering power just vanishing into thin air. That's one heck of a cliffhanger. So we've got this grand adventure, we've got globe-trotting intrigue, high-stakes action, a touch of the supernatural. But there's still the question of that open world. Does it, like, enhance the story, or does it distract from it?
That is a great question, and that's exactly what we're going to unpack in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay.
Take a moment, listeners, and think about what we've covered so far. Does this feel like a classic Indiana Jones story? Does that open world structure add to the experience, or would you prefer a more focused, linear narrative? Because we're going to tackle that big debate, open world versus classic adventure, and we're going to see if Indiana Jones and the Great Circle strikes that right balance.
Okay, so we're in the final stretch of our deep dive into Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. We've talked about the story, the characters, the globe-trotting action. But now it's time to tackle the elephant in the room.
The open world.
Yeah, that open world design. It's been a point of contention, hasn't it, for critics and players alike. Does it actually enhance the indie experience, or does it just water down that classic cinematic feel?
Yeah, I think it's a debate that a lot of people are having. And honestly, I don't think there's a super easy answer. It really boils down to, like, what do you like as a player?
Right.
What are you looking for in an Indiana Jones game? Do you want a tightly paced, story-driven, thrill ride like the movies?
Right.
Or do you want the freedom to explore, discover all the secrets and kind of make your own adventure?
I'm usually all for a good open world. But with indie, I can see both sides. I think part of the appeal of the movies is that sense of momentum, that constant forward drive, like Indy's racing against time, racing against the villains to find the treasure. So how does this open world approach actually play out in the game? Does it feel like a natural extension of the indie formula, or does it feel kind of tacked on?
It's definitely a noticeable shift from, the classic formula. You're not just on this linear path, you're given this freedom to roam, to uncover hidden tombs, delve into optional side quests. You can really, soak in the atmosphere of these locations. And they're beautifully crafted locations, might I add.
Okay, yeah.
On the one hand, it does allow for this level of immersion and discovery that's pretty rare, I'd say, in an Indiana Jones game. You truly feel like you're exploring at your own pace, making choices, charting your own course.
Right. It's like you're actually stepping into Indy's boots. You're not just watching him go through the motions.
Right.
But the gamer article we talked about and some of the critics, they argue that this freedom comes at a cost. They felt like the side quests, they felt kind of repetitive, they felt like they lacked the narrative punch of the main story, and that the open world was ultimately a distraction from the core indie experience. Do you think there's any validity to that?
Yeah, there is. I think not all of the side content is super engaging. Some of it can feel a little bit like filler, like it was designed to, pad out the game's length rather than adding any meaningful depth. And for those players who prioritize story and pacing, that can be kind of frustrating. It's like being offered this delicious 5-course meal, but then you have to wade through this buffet of mediocre appetizers before you can get to the main course.
Oh, that's a great analogy. So it's a mixed bag then.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Moments of brilliance and moments of mediocrity.
Right.
But, even with all the criticism, there were players who absolutely loved the open world. They praised the sense of freedom, the opportunity to just unearth hidden treasures and lore, just the sheer joy of getting lost in these really richly detailed environments. What was it about the open world that you think resonated with them?
I think it really speaks to that core element of exploration and discovery that's so essential, I would say, to that Indiana Jones experience. In the movies, Indy's often stumbling upon these unexpected clues and hidden paths and dangerous challenges. He's constantly having to improvise,
Right.
adapt, use his wits to overcome all these obstacles. And that open world, with its emphasis on player agency and exploration, it allows those players to embody that same spirit. They're not just following this script, they're actually shaping their own adventures.
Right. That's such a good point. It's not just about the content of the open world.
Right.
It's about the mindset it encourages. Embrace the unknown. Take risks. Trust your instincts. And that does feel very indie when you think about it. But there's one final piece of the puzzle I want to address before we wrap up. That comparison to Chronicles of Riddick.
Right.
Remember that? Some players felt like this indie game was just a reskinned Escape from Butcher Bay, borrowing too heavily from its gameplay mechanics. Is that a fair assessment, or is it just like a superficial similarity?
Well, I think it's true they share some DNA, especially in that blend of first-person action and stealth. And given that the same studio developed both games, there's going to be some overlap. But to say that Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is just a Riddick reskin is way too simplistic.
Yeah.
This game has its own unique story, its own characters, its own atmosphere. It leans way more heavily into puzzle solving and exploration. And the whip, of course, plays a much bigger role than in Riddick. So while there are some familiar elements, I would say the overall experience is really distinct.
So it's more of an homage than a ripoff.
Yeah.
Taking inspiration from some really successful mechanics while still forging its own path.
Yep.
And that's how creativity works, isn't it?
Right.
You build upon what came before, add your own twist, add your own perspective, and ultimately it's up to the player to decide if those borrowed elements enhance the experience or detract from it.
Yeah. It's all about the execution. And in the end, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle really stands on its own merits. It's a game that's both familiar and surprising. It's thrilling and thought-provoking. It might not be a perfect game. It might not please every single indie fan, but it's a really bold attempt to bring that iconic adventurer into, the modern gaming landscape.
And isn't that what we want from an Indiana Jones game?
Right.
Something that pushes the boundaries, something that takes risks, that challenges our expectations. It's not about recreating the movies beat for beat. It's about capturing that spirit of adventure, that sense of wonder, that feeling of stepping out into the unknown.
Yes.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we leave you with this final thought. Does Indiana Jones and the Great Circle succeed in its mission? Does it actually capture the essence of Indy while forging its own path? That's for you to decide. But hopefully this deep dive has given you the tools, the insights, to make that decision for yourself.
We encourage you to explore the game, engage with its story, and form your own opinions. Whether you embrace that open world or you stick to the main narrative, we hope you enjoy the adventure. And who knows, maybe this is just the beginning of a whole new era for Indiana Jones in the gaming world.
I hope so. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, listeners. We'll be back soon with another fascinating topic, another stack of sources, and another journey into the depths of knowledge and entertainment. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep adventuring.